On today's episode of Locked On Oilers, the Oilers still have a little bit to do with a little bit of cap space. What will the Edmonton Oilers do, and what do the Edmonton Oilers need? All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Oilers podcast. I'm your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. Yes, on today's episode, the Edmonton Oilers still have a couple moves to make. It seems like Dylan Strome obviously is out of the picture as he signed in Washington. Connor Brown is out of the picture. He also got traded to Washington. So what do the Oilers need to do, and who do they need to bring in? We will talk about that in just a second. Plus, last night was the Billy Moore's Cup as all the prospects, as it was development camp this week. It all came together to this game, and it was fun. It was fun. A little summer hockey. We will get into just who was in that game, who really performed in that game. Just a great tradition in the Oilers organization. Plus, it's Friday. It's Friday, baby. So we are going to go through our predictions as well for next week of free agency, all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Alrighty, so the Edmonton Oilers did make a splash on day one of free agency, as they did sign their goaltender of the future in Jack Campbell, or at least the guy they want to ride with over at least next year and following years, at least 5 years, by $5 million in Jack Campbell. They also re-signed Evander Kane to a 4-year, $5.125 million per year contract. Comes out to about $20.5 million overall. Also, Greg McKegg, former, well, basically name a team, he probably played there. But in Toronto, I wanted to mention, he did play in Toronto, and he wore the number 69. Yeah, isn't that awesome? We're 69, it's hilarious. Yeah, no kidding, Jay Baruchel. Greg McKegg wore it in Toronto. Also, Calvin Pickard was signed by the Edmonton Oilers. He's kind of seen as the organization's third goaltender in case Jack Campbell or Stuart Skinner goes down. Just a guy who has experience, who they can slot in just in case. I mean, they don't really have a lot of organizational depth now in the goal. But a showing from a goaltender in the Billy Moore's Cup may have proved us wrong there. We'll get to that a little later. So the Edmonton Oilers still have needs. It seemed like they were going to get Connor Brown on and off on free agency day, all the way up till draft day, or since draft day. And I even said that it was basically done from Ottawa with Jesse Puljujarvi. That wasn't the case. He went to Washington for a second-round pick. Dylan Strome also went to Washington as well, signed there yesterday. So what do the Oilers do now? Who's available? Where do the Oilers need to improve? Well, the two major areas for the Edmonton Oilers that they need to improve on or improve in is that bottom six and the bottom of their forwards and the bottom four of their defense. They have a little bit of leeway with the defense with the re-signing of Kulak, but they were always in trying to get another defenseman after they finished the Kulak signing. So who are they going after? Well, let's start with that bottom four defense. And the thing about the defenseman this year is that in the market, or the free market, is that it's not necessarily too friendly or too top-loaded unless you want a PK Subban, which I wouldn't mind, but I'm not going to pay a lot of money for PK Subban. So the Edmonton Oilers are going to have to really go budget. I guess thrifting would be more of the way. So who's available? I have 4 or 5 names here that are pretty interesting to me. I don't know if they're on your radar. I want to know who you think the Oilers should take a swing at. But one name that I think would be interesting for the Oilers to take a look at is a guy that they were trying to sign coming out of college. Unfortunately, they ended up losing to a Michigan-based team. Well, who was managing that team? That was Ken Holland. And that is Danny DeKeyser. Yes, when he was coming into the league from college, a lot of people saw him as basically kind of a Justin Schultz type. That hasn't really materialized, especially over the last few years. He was all right, especially going into his contract years after his first signing his first NHL contract. Then he signed that second NHL contract, and since then it's just kind of been muddied waters. So I think the Edmonton Oilers, it could be a little bit of a high risk, not really high risk, low risk, high reward, basically, type of thing. You know that this guy is going to be playing lower bottom 4 minutes for you, eating those minutes that, you know, the top guys just aren't using right now. And you could really fill out your back end with a veteran presence in Danny DeKeyser. Last year, 59 games played, no goals, but 11 assists for him in Detroit. Another name that I think would be interesting for the Oilers to take a look at would be Calvin DeHaan out of Chicago, a longtime New York Islander who was one of my favorite teams as well growing up. But I know that sounds weird, Oilers, Islanders. I know. I like Travis Hamonic before everything. Yes, anyways, that's a long story. That's off to the side. Calvin DeHaan last year in Chicago, 69 games played, 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points in the Central Division over there. I think Calvin DeHaan, another guy, most of these guys, actually all of these guys have a veteran presence, and that is what I think the Edmonton Oilers do need in their next bottom 4 guy. You don't need a guy who is struggling or has struggled over the last few years and just doesn't have the experience of a good season before or a successful season in their minds. With most of the guys that I have here, they've all had successful seasons. You basically know what you're going to get out of them. Kind of, not necessarily, I don't want to compare them to a Chris Russell, but you knew what you were getting out of Chris Russell. Now Chris Russell is testing free agency, and you don't have a guy kind of like that who you know what you're going to get game in and game out. These are the type of players that I have here that you're going to get. The third guy, Michael Kempny, split time between Washington and was sent down to Hershey. I think the Oilers could get him for a good price. Another veteran guy, another guy who can play in both ends of the ice. Another pedigree type guy, won a Stanley Cup as well. In 15 games played at with the big club, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. So again, not 2 point heavy, but a guy, obviously he played in Hershey as well, so you can kind of have a little bit of flexibility with him there as well. Fourth name, Michael Del Zotto. It sounded like the Edmonton Oilers were almost looking at Michael Del Zotto in a potential trade with Ottawa during the draft. It sounded like that was a player that was being thrown back to the Oilers in a potential Zach Kassian deal. Obviously, that didn't go down, and the Oilers got the 32nd overall pick and dumped that contract. But Michael Del Zotto is on the market. He could be a cheap option for the Oilers. A decent year for him, all things considered, in Ottawa. 26 games played for him down there, 3 goals, 10 assists, 13 points. So again, decent 26 games, basically a half a point per game. Not too bad. And the final defenseman I have here for the Edmonton Oilers is former 2nd overall pick. The guy the Edmonton Oilers passed over in the 2012 draft, Ryan Murray. Ryan Murray's on the free market. Now, could the Edmonton Oilers go back and correct that wrong from the Nail Yakupov trade or draft and draft the defenseman that was there? Maybe. Or sign the defenseman that was there? Maybe. Last season, 37 games played, no goals, 4 assists, 4 points. Sounds kind of, why would you want him? Well, he won a Stanley Cup last year, in case you forgot where he played. Yeah, he played for the Colorado Avalanche. Remember them, Oilers fans? I know, you did. You think back to that really strong defensive core in Colorado, and you wouldn't have thought Ryan Murray would have been one of those guys manning that defensive core. It was Ryan Murray, Stanley Cup champion. Actually, Nail Yakupov won the KHL Cup before Ryan Murray. Neither here nor there. We will get into, so those are the bottom 4. Those are the defensemen that I have here. I want to know what you think in regards to defensemen. There's a major market, of course. But what do you think? Are any of those guys fits? Do you have any other guys that you're taking a look at saying, though, that guy might fit well with the Oilers? I want to know. We will move on to the forwards, as I have about 6 or 7 here, so we'll split it up in a sec. Here, there's some interesting names, some Stanley Cup winners as well. We will get into that in just a second, but first, I want to tell you about our partners over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including... Now get this, they have the lines for the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference, who will get the highest, but it seems like they may be changing up their Stanley Cup odds. I told you a couple days ago, I think the Edmonton Oilers might be higher than where the Flames were and where the Leafs were just before. Because at the end of the season, the Leafs and the Flames were slated to higher. They were higher than the Oilers. They had better betting odds than the Oilers to win the Stanley Cup. Well, now Toronto has Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov in the net. And, well, Johnny Gaudreau is no longer in Calgary, so I have a feeling those odds are going to go down. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports scores, and much more. And BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, I realize we haven't done a little bit of a hydration break in a little bit, at least this entire week. I know it's been a busy week, so let's all take a collective hydration break. Okay, there we go. Pinky up. It's Friday. We're going into the weekend. You got to be hydrated for that great. It looks like it's going to be a warm weekend, everybody. Knock on wood, because I keep jinxing it. All right, let's move into the forwards, as the Edmonton Oilers are still looking to shore up that bottom six. No pun intended, Devon Shore. The Edmonton Oilers do need a couple guys potentially in that bottom six. It seems like now with Connor Brown not becoming an Edmonton Oiler, that Jesse Puljujärvi will probably come back. I'm not sure. So, how many spaces are really available? We're not too sure, but the Edmonton Oilers still need some spots to play with. Now, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 names here that we'll fire off real quick. There's a couple of them that I wonder if they are willing to play in the bottom six. A couple of them who are more than willing, but not sure if they are fit for the Edmonton Oilers or the NHL really anymore. That is where I want you to decide whether or not that's a good idea. But let's start off with the first name, a name that we have discussed in, actually a previous video or a previous episode in which we talked about, my dream summer for the Edmonton Oilers, and that was bringing in Danton Heinen. I've always liked Danton Heinen, and Danton Heinen has very solid numbers over his career this past season in Pittsburgh. 76 games played, 18 goals, 15 assists, 33 points again for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He bounced around, came to Pittsburgh from, I believe he was in Boston before. If not, I think he had one stop before going into Pittsburgh. But in Boston as well, had a very solid career over there as well. I forget which goals for, goals against stat it was. I believe it was goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, or in all situations. He sits at 16th over the last 5 seasons in the entire NHL. So not only can he produce offensively, but he can also protect defensively. So a good two-way guy. I think the Edmonton Oilers could get him for cheap. Danton Heinen from Pittsburgh. The second name that I have for the Edmonton Oilers here, it seems like he's kind of the guy that the Edmonton Oilers are leaning towards right now. And I say that after saying that was the exact same thing with Dylan Strome. So I clearly know my stuff. But Sonny Milano out of Anaheim. He had a very solid season playing with Trevor Zegras over there in Disneyland, basically. 66 games played for him down there, 14 goals, 20 assists, 39 points. I think he would be a great addition to the Edmonton Oilers. We have very similar hair as well, so that would really help me out. I'd get a Sonny Milano jersey, no problem. I think a guy who can go into the dirty areas. He has a scoring touch as well. I think a very solid guy to have in your bottom six. He could pair well with Jesse Puljujarvi and Ryan McLeod, I think. I think it'd be a great addition for the Edmonton Oilers. Now, here's the first kind of, maybe not. But I wanted to throw this out there just to send out some feelers, because the Edmonton Oilers have played this guy a lot throughout his career. He played against him in Vancouver, in Dallas, a guy who is very difficult to play against. And every time you play against him, you really notice it. That's Antoine Roussel. Yes, he is still in the league. He spent the last season in Arizona, so I understand why you may have been, oh my goodness, he's still in the league. But last year he had 53 games played, 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points. For Antoine Roussel, again, like I mentioned, difficult guy to play against. But you always know where he is on the ice. He can chip in whenever he needs to. And he can also kill penalties as well. So I think Antoine Roussel would be a great ad, potentially for the Edmonton Oilers as well, and cheap too, nearing the end of his career. Another guy who's nearing the end of his career as well, which is weird to say, because I remember this kid coming into the league, and that's Cody Eakin. He's still available as well. Last season in Buffalo, 69 games played, 4 goals, 8 assists, 12 points, a guy that it seemed like the Edmonton Oilers have always wanted to get. Now might be the time with his experience and everything like that. He could really be a very strong bottom six guy for the Edmonton Oilers. Next guy, Zach Aston Reese, played in Pittsburgh and Anaheim, so a little bit of a mix between Danton Heinen and Sonny Milano. But he had a really good season last season. Well, a pretty decent season last season, I should say. 69 games played, 5 goals, 10 assists, 15 points. But for him, I'd like Zach Aston Reese. He's a guy who's been around, who's really been experienced on very good teams. So I think Zach Aston Reese would be kind of a sneaky good signing for the Edmonton Oilers. 2 more names here to bring in for the bottom 6, I think, for the Edmonton Oilers. This one, I think, might be, he may have priced himself out of the Edmonton Oilers bottom 6, I guess, because these numbers aren't bottom 6, but this guy has played bottom 6 basically his whole career, unless he was on not a very good team. But he's always been very good himself, and that's Evan Rodriguez. Yes, Evan Rodriguez played last season in Pittsburgh, and last season, 82 games played. He played the full season, 19 goals, 24 assists, 43 points. The most points on this list, and could you imagine getting almost upwards of 50 points out of your bottom 6? It depends on what the market is for Evan Rodriguez. It really does. I'm not sure where teams are valuing him right now, but a very solid ad for the Edmonton Oilers either way. And the final guy for the Edmonton Oilers that I think they could take a look at in the bottom 6, another Stanley Cup winner, Cedric Paquette. Yes, not a fantastic season for him in Tampa Bay, but still played for Tampa Bay. A very solid organization there, brought in by Steve Yzerman, and basically grew that dynasty there. In 24 games played, no goals, 2 assists, 2 points. So again, just a bottom line type guy. I think he'd be a decent ad for the Oilers. So those are my 2 major needs for the Edmonton Oilers. What do you think the major needs for the Oilers are basically for the rest of the offseason? As you hear my stuff get hammered everywhere, but that is okay. Who do you think the Edmonton Oilers should take a look at now with basically everything shoring up here? Where do they need help? Who should they take a look at? Stuff like that. Alrighty, last night the Billy Moore's Cup was played at the Downtown District Arena, or what, a Downtown Community Arena. The DCA, they call it. I've been there a few too many times watching McEwen and Nate hockey teams play, so know that place quite well. But The Edmonton Oilers had their Development Camp Cup, while the Billy Moore's Cup last night. A lot of exciting prospects in that game, and what a game it was, really. A lot of guys who really needed to show out or really expose themselves to the big club. They did that, especially last night and especially throughout development camp, if you take a look at some of the reports from there. But we will get to that in just a second. First, I just want to thank you for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, make sure you tune in to Locked On NHL, as Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world with Locked On NHL. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. Alrighty, the Billy Moore's Cup last night finished. It was a barn burner. I have two notes here, people. Two notes. Two boards of notes here. Not two notes. Could you imagine if I only had two notes? No. But yes, a big game for the Billy Moore's Cup last night. A big game for a lot of prospects in the Edmonton Oilers organization. Last night, Team White went up against Team Blue in the Billy Moore's Cup, and Team Blue, the team that a lot of people were kind of saying had the more experience on their team, pulled it off in a quite exciting fashion. They played 10 minutes 5-on-5. Okay, let's back up here. It was broken up into two halves instead of three periods. So in the first half, there was 10 minutes of 5-on-5, and then the last 10 minutes were 4-on-4. Quick little flood of the ice, and then 10 more minutes of 5-on-5, and then 10 minutes of 3-on-3. Man, that was exciting, and that was where Team Blue started to pull away. Edmonton Oilers 6th rounder from 2021. Let's start from the top. Got the scoring started for Team White. Shane LaChance from the assist from Ty Nash. Do you recognize that name? Yeah, son of Tyson Nash. Yes, former NHLer. Yes, Shane LaChance got the first goal of the Billy Moore's Cup again. 6th rounder for the Edmonton Oilers. 2021 pick, a guy the Edmonton Oilers kind of take a flyer on, but nice little goal for him. Then, a guy that I was taking a look at here found Pearson. I can't remember his first name. Pearson was a camp invite, I should say here. But the feed came from Noah Gansky. Yes, Noah Gansky, not drafted into the Edmonton Oilers organization, but he stands at 6'7", and he's 23 years old. He is an undrafted prospect that the Edmonton Oilers brought in from the Wisconsin River Falls in the NCAA, the third division over there last year. He had 22 games played, 8 goals, 11 assists, good for 19 points from a 6'7" defenseman. Fleet of foot. I could see, and Bob Stauffer even mentioned this on the broadcast as well. He wonders if he's somebody that the Edmonton Oilers might take a look at developing in their organization as well. Great skater for a 23-year-old at 6'7". Apparently he had some personal problems. I wasn't able to find anything on that, but that's something that Bob mentioned on the broadcast as well over the last few months. So maybe a name to take a look out for the Edmonton Oilers after this development camp. But anyways, that would tie the game for Team Blue at 1-1. And then Adam Hall, another camp invite, made it 2-1 for Team White. Not Alex Chason, but Jake Chason, 4th rounder for the Edmonton Oilers in 2021, then made it 3-1 for Team White, and it seemed like they were running away with it. Then Carter Savoy, the Edmonton Oilers 4th rounder, 100th overall draft pick from 2020, went on to, he had a shootout, or a penalty shot, I should say, with some chasers. Got stopped, but that same opportunity, that same shift, I should say, came back and just roofed one past Ryan Fanti for Team Blue to make it 3-2 for Team White. Then Matvei Petrov, a guy who a lot of people have had being the best potential prospect, or kind of the most impressive for a lot of people in the development camp. A guy from North Bay, or played for North Bay Battalion. He's a Russian kid. The Edmonton Oilers picked him in the 6th round, and a lot of people are taking a look at that and going, that is a steal. You know who else went pretty late in the NHL draft, if I'm not mistaken, in the 6th round? Pavel Datsyuk. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. He made the game 4-2 for Team White, and it seemed like, again, Team White was all in control. But Tyler Tullio, the Oshawa General, the Edmonton Oilers picked him back in 2020 in the 5th round, made it 4-3. Then Noah Philp, the University of Alberta Golden Bear, former Golden Bear, who signed a pro contract last year after their, I almost said CIS, U Sport season ended there. He tied it up for them. A lot of talk around Noah Philp as well. Very strong kid, local kid as well. Then Reed Schaefer, the Edmonton Oilers first round pick from this past year, got the lead back for Team White, I should say. It is 5-4 for Team White. Then Adam Hall once again made it 6-4, and that is when Team Blue said, no more for you. James Hamblin goes back-to-back. The Edmonton Oilers signed him out of the Medicine Hat Tigers. He played last year in Bakersfield. For him last year, 64 games played, 21 goals, 14 assists, 35 points down in Baco. Very solid season for him. Could be a guy potentially that the Edmonton Oilers look at it bringing up at some point in the season as well this next year. The next guy, I believe, was another camp invite for the Edmonton Oilers. Ernisi made it 7-6 for Team Blue, and they didn't look back. Tyler Tullio with the second of the game made it 8-6, and then Skylar Brindamore, the Edmonton Oilers 6th round pick from all the way back in 2017, put it away for Team Blue, making it 9-6 for the more experienced club. As you could hear from some of those names there, Carter Savoy, Skylar Brendamore, James Hamblin, Tyler Tullio, Luka Munzenberger was on that team as well. 23-year-old Noah Gansky, excuse me. I tried that 3 times, still realized it was not the right one. But a lot of interesting names for the Edmonton Oilers in that Billy Moore's Cup. There, as I mentioned, Matvei Petrov, who last season in North Bay, 63 games played, 40 goals, 50 assists, 90 points for him there. As I mentioned, a 6th round pick for the Edmonton Oilers. But they picked him there because he still wasn't over in North Bay yet. He was still over in Russia, over in Europe. Then that same year, after the Oilers drafted him in the 6th round, North Bay selected him with the 1st overall pick in the export draft. And since then, if he was in the OHL, a lot of people would have said, or a lot of people have said, that if he was, he probably wouldn't have gone in the 6th round. So the Edmonton Oilers got a steal there. Carter Savoy, another guy who was very noticeable last year at the University of Denver. 39 games played, 23 goals, 22 assists, 45 points for him. Also made his way to Bakersfield at some point as well. Played in the playoffs a couple times for them down there. Getting familiar with the organization, could be a guy that the Edmonton Oilers see, not necessarily this year, but maybe next year as well. A couple other names. Reed Schaefer looked pretty decent. A lot of people commenting on his skating. I thought it was pretty decent. A guy who, he wasn't necessarily overbearing in the game, but you realize when he was out there. James Hamblin, again, a guy that the Edmonton Oilers, you may see the Edmonton Oilers pulling up at some point this year, I think, depending on the year that he has. I don't want to put him in this boat, but he could end up kind of being like a Cooper Marody type, where all of the Oilers fans are going, bring him up, bring him up, bring him up. I don't know. I don't want to already put this kid's future into whatever, right? But the name that a lot of people are mentioning is Ryan Fanti. Now, Ryan Fanti is a goaltender that the Edmonton Oilers signed out of the NCAA after the Frozen Four championships. They lost to, he played for Minnesota Duluth. They played the University of Denver in, I believe it was the semifinals. They lost out to the University of Denver thanks to a goal from Carter Savoy. Now, last year, Ryan Fanti, who then signed after losing to Carter Savoy's eventual national champions, the University of Denver, he signed with the Edmonton Oilers after that. But in the NCAA, he had a record of 20 wins, 12 losses, 4 in overtime, but then had a .929 save percentage and a 1.83 goals against. Very solid numbers. And then you saw what he did in the game last night. Could be a guy the Edmonton Oilers might have just stolen for their goalie of the future. Another goaltender that we saw last night is Samuel Jönsson from Sweden, the Edmonton Oilers' 5th round draft pick from this past weekend from Sweden, a guy who a lot of people wanted to take a look at, and for him, not too bad of a game. The difficult thing for him was that he comes in for 5-on-5 for 10 minutes, and then for the rest of the game, it's 3-on-3. And if you saw any of that game for about 3.5, 4 minutes, it was just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, 2-on-1, 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 2-on-1. It's a tough game for goaltenders, so decent game for him as well. A lot of names for people to really be excited about for the future for the Edmonton Oilers. Again, Shane LeChance as well, a 6th round pick for the Oilers, maybe a guy that may turn out, played for the Youngstown Phantoms in the USHL, now going to Boston University. Carter Savoy, again, Matvei Petrov, Tyler Tullio, Noah Philp as well, Reed Schaefer, James Hamblin, Ryan Fanti. I haven't even mentioned my favorite prospect yet, and that is Luka Munzenberger. I love Luka Munzenberger. I thought he had a very solid game last night as well. Rangy defenseman, can skate, more of a defensive defenseman. That's why you didn't hear any of his name here, because this isn't the type of game he plays. He plays at the University of Vermont along with Yoel Mata, who the Edmonton Oilers drafted in the 7th round. The coach at the University of Vermont is Jay Woodcroft's brother. So a guy that the Edmonton Oilers organization is getting a lot of exposure to. I love him. I really think he may turn out for the Edmonton Oilers. And I wonder, the name again to kind of take a look for after the development camp is Noah Gansky. Take a look if the Edmonton Oilers maybe sign him to a professional contract, maybe to an amateur contract down in Bakersfield. I don't know. But a guy who really impressed in that game last night. Bob Stauffer mentioned him as well afterwards, or during the game as well. See maybe if the Edmonton Oilers could develop him in any point. Alrighty, really quickly, I know we're really pushing time here, but I want to get into our very quick predictions from last week and for next week as well. So let's get into those predictions really quick. Last week, I predicted that Jesse Puljujarvi would be an Ottawa Senator at this point, and Connor Brown would be an Edmonton Oiler. That didn't go to plan. Connor Brown got sent to the Washington Capitals for a 2nd round pick, and Jesse Puljujarvi is still an Edmonton Oiler. Don't get me wrong. I love Jesse Puljujarvi. I will be a Jesse Puljujarvi stan till the day I die. I wanted him, as I mentioned so many times, on the Edmonton Oilers since he was 16 years old. So if the Edmonton Oilers keep him, I will love it. But I was wrong there. The second thing that I had for the Edmonton Oilers doing this week is signing Dylan Strome. He also went to Washington. Should have just guessed he went to Washington. I would have got it right. But got that one wrong as well. But I did get one right. I also predicted that Jack Campbell will become an Edmonton Oiler, and that he did. Normally, to my dismay, honestly, now sitting here after a couple days letting it stew, excuse me, maybe I should say soup. I think Jack Campbell's the right guy for the Oilers. I'm really excited for that. Yes, I've changed my tune. But let's take a look at what I think will happen next week really quickly from the Edmonton Oilers. The first thing is I think Jesse Puljujarvi resigns with the Edmonton Oilers. and will be an Edmonton Oiler next year. I'm really excited about that, bringing back all three of Kyler Yamamoto, Jesse Puljujarvi, and Ryan McLeod. At one point didn't look realistic. Now it does. Really excited for that. I love Jesse Puljujarvi, as mentioned. The second thing that I think will happen over the next week is I think Sonny Milano will become an Edmonton Oiler. Very similar to my Dylan Strome call, so if it doesn't happen, I am so sorry. And the final thing that I think will happen over the next week is I think it is the time for Warren Foegele to get traded. A lot I can say about it. I like Warren Foegele. I think his chemistry on the team with guys like Kyler Yamamoto, Ryan McLeod, and Evan Bouchard are invaluable. But he's getting paid $2.75 million a year on that cap space to play on the fourth line and not really produce. The Edmonton Oilers could get a guy maybe like an Evan Rodriguez who can produce more and do more than Warren Foegele, not Evan Bouchard. But that is where we shall call it here as we moved the predictions thing over. But yes, we shall call it there. Sorry, no episode yesterday, as we were really just sitting there waiting for another move. Never happened. Maybe we will get an extra move today to go into the weekend too, but that is all right. Either way, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe and don't do anything I wouldn't do.